All right, Justin Hokanson with us, @_J Hokanson. You see him at Auburn Live, part of On3 Sports. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What's up, Hoke? How are you?
I'm good, guys. What's going on?
Not much. Brian Harsin answered a lot of questions about quarterback yesterday. Did you learn anything maybe you didn't already know, or did you glean anything from what he said if you read between the lines and pair words that you might not have thought about the quarterback situation?
Not necessarily. I mean, it was a different tone than before Mercer. Before Mercer, he came out and said, hey, we got to get TJ reps with the first team. And when camp's going on, there's 3 guys taking reps. And so it's important that in this first game, it's TJ's job. It's TJ's job. We're going to get him reps. And then they go out and TJ, I think, was 38 snaps and Ashford was like 26 for the game. And then yesterday, Brian Harsin says, yeah, that was totally the game plan. So it's not kind of what he said before the game. It sounded like it was going to be Finley's job to go out there and operate. And then they go out there and Ashford was constantly being mixed in. And then, of course, after TJ's second interception, Robby played the rest of the game. So, but nothing. I mean, that was kind of an interesting, I guess, development in terms of how much Robby played, how early he played, and really what Brian Harsin said on Monday was he kind of just backed that up and said that's the deal. I listened to Shanker on you guys' show talk about the hot hand, and it's kind of what it sounded like with Harsin. I mean, he talked about the Boise State quarterbacks in 2019. He played 3 quarterbacks at Boise State. And so, and even talked about philosophically, he has no problem with that. He doesn't subscribe to if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none type of deal. So kind of giving him listening to him talk about philosophically where he's at on playing quarterbacks. Hey, I'm going to play the best player. They're just like any other player. I think it sets the stage for Finley and Ashford to do this for the next few weeks at least. I mean, unless somebody completely takes the reins on this job, it certainly seems like you have 2 guys that bring something to the table, but not the complete package, and you're going to see them both until we don't. I mean, that's just kind of what it sounds like.
Apparently, Calzada's got a lukewarm hand because that guy's out of the conversation, out of the equation. Is he 100% healthy?
I would say no. I think the shoulder he had surgery on, his left shoulder, it did cause him some issues in the fall camp. You didn't really hear about it, but it was an issue. It wasn't why he didn't win the job, but it was an issue. And so is he good enough to go out there and win? I think he's fine. I think he'd go out there and win a football game and throw the football. But he's not 100%. Probably ideally it's get some type of better surgery on that left shoulder or get a surgery that completely fixes the deal and sit out longer than he did if you wanted to be really, really healthy. But yeah, I mean, Harsin mentioned him briefly on Monday and said, hey, he's still coming along and we're still prepping him too. I know that they're still telling him, hey, be ready, be ready. But is that because they want to play him, or is that because they don't want him to leave in case they need him? I don't know. So I just think that Robby's going to play because he brings that change of pace. And then it's who's the other guy to manage the game. And right now it's TJ. So there really isn't room for a third guy. If Finley were to get hurt, maybe then it would be Zach and Robby sharing time in a game potentially. And so it's just kind of the way it's set up. But yeah, right now, Zach's, I think he's preparing in case they need him. And I think the coaches want to keep him prepared. You never know. But right now it certainly seems like just kind of a 2 quarterback rotation.
Listen, you're no different than any other media person for 30, 50 years that have covered the sport that are not surprised by at least one thing in game 1, right? You think it's going to be one way, and one thing in game 1 surprises you. After watching game 1, was there a player, a position group, or something that surprised you that wasn't either good or bad exactly the way you thought it was going to be going into the season?
I'll tell you something that surprised me probably in game 1 was some of the player rotations. I thought Mercer was a great opportunity to get some of these guys. You got Mercer and San Jose State, and then the schedule gets real. And so I was a little surprised. You look out there and Camden Brown, who's a guy we heard about all the time. He had 6 snaps to
Yeah, and that's the one player that we talked about all off season. That was the one name I was going to bring up. You said, Jim, really nothing surprised me. I'm different than the media people the last 50 years. I knew everything. I was going to say, but Camden Brown, everyone, we were talking big about him. The guy was never on the field.
Yeah, 6 snaps. And Xavion Capers, who's his backup, played 4. So the 2 guys that back up Shed Jackson played 10 total snaps. And Shed was in there at the end of the game. Morris Joseph Jr., a guy that we heard about, that multiple players and coaches talked about as a quality reserve, a quality guy adding depth at the defensive line. He played like maybe 10 snaps, I think less than that. Eugene Asante played like 4 or 5 snaps. So some of the rotations and some of the player snaps was kind of a really interesting thing for me in game 1 to look out there and see kind of your main guys played the vast majority, even after an hour and a half rain delay. I thought it would have been a good opportunity to get some of those other guys in, and it didn't happen. Even Javaris Johnson, who had a good game, only played 15 snaps in that game. So that's kind of something I'm looking for in game 2. Is look, this is kind of your, it's San Jose State, and then it's Penn State, and you got to start playing your starters, and the snaps are going to go up. Derek Hall, Iko Leota played a ton of snaps, so that's kind of something I'm watching game 2 is, do some of these guys we heard about in camp adding depth or kind of emerging players, do they get more snaps? And if they don't, why? Is it a trust thing? Is it they're just not there yet? What's the reasoning? Because we did hear a lot about some of these guys in camp adding depth and quality and all that good stuff. So I want to see some snaps in game 2, see if it changes at all.
Justin Hokanson with us on 3 Sports, Auburn Live. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. You can follow Hoke on Twitter @_J Hokanson. With the Nick Brahms news, obviously there's a shakeup at offensive line. From your observation, how do you think that offensive line performed with kind of look, they haven't had Brahms all camp, so they were not surprised by this, but you expected him to be out there when you looked at this Auburn team in the offseason. How did you think the offensive line performed?
Well, they're okay. I think Tate played well for his first start. I saw Pro Football Focus, had him rated pretty highly. I think Brian Harsin talked about him, said he played well. Brandon Council was really proud of how he played. So I think Tate Johnson's going to be a guy that will be okay this year. I don't think he'll be the reason that they struggle in the run game. In other words, I don't think he'll be a liability. I think he'll be okay. So he played well overall. They ran the ball well, but some of that was Ashford with some breakaway runs, and I didn't see complete dominance from that group, but I didn't see a lot of penetration either. I think Auburn may have had maybe 3 running plays that went for no gain or loss of yardage. Everything else they did went positive. So there wasn't a lot of penetration and stuff happening, which is kind of the first thing you look at are there breakdowns in that regard. So I think they played well. Still a lot of room for improvement. I would say I saw the stat about Tank Bigsby breaking the most tackles in week 1, and while that sounds awesome, you could also say, why does he have to break so many tackles against Mercer to get 147 yards? You could go both ways with that. But he did break some downfield. But I think they played okay. I'd probably give them maybe a B, something like that. They played okay. No penetration, but we all know you're not really going to know until Penn State and you play P.J. Mustipher and that defensive line, and let's see if you can get pushed there. And then we'll know a little bit more about what this group's capable of.
Hoke, other side of the ball, pleasant surprise, Cam Riley. 14 total tackles last year, had 15 in his first career start.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And, here's an example of a guy we did talk about, and he stepped up and he looked like it. We weren't sure. He was kind of one of my question marks. He looks the part, a lot of athletic ability, but he hadn't done it. And he goes out there in game 1 and does it and looked great. 15 tackles. He was sideline to sideline. They're there for a period. I don't know if it was second or third quarter. It seemed like for a few minutes he was making every tackle. And so he looked great. If he can build on that, a 6'4.5" guy that's 230, that's running sideline to sideline, that's stuffing the line, stuff in the middle, kind of stopping runners in their tracks. He looked fantastic. And Owen Papo only had a couple of tackles in that game. Riley completely stole the show. Matter of fact, Cam Riley, he had 9 solo tackles. That still would have led the team in tackles. So he was really, really good. He was probably the story, I would say, of the whole team, kind of the guy that you're like, wow, that was special. And if that was more than just one game, if he continues that on, you've got you've got a really, really good player on the rise there in Cam Riley. So that was very good to see.
You've mentioned it a couple of times. One more exhibition game before Penn State comes to town for a national broadcast at Jordan-Hare Stadium. The new coordinators, the new routine of getting plays and defensive schemes in. Did you hear any buzz of any problems or any praise of how smooth that went from the coaches? Did it go well? It looked like it went great.
Yeah, I think it went well. I mean, I don't remember. I mean, there were I don't think they had a delay game. I don't think they had very few penalties. I don't remember any specific false starts or anything like that. So offensively, it seemed to go pretty smoothly. Defensively, Schmedding was kind of in there, so I kind of expected that to be a little bit better than offense. But I think everything went well. I think it'll just be interesting to see, talking about those coordinators, is okay, how creative do they get in game 2? How creative do they get in game 3? Because it was very vanilla against Mercer, very vanilla. What does Schmedding do defensively? The secondary, I thought the secondary was kind of mediocre. I think they've got to show more than what they did in game 1. But in terms of operations, no issues from anything we saw, and no issues from anything Brian Harsin talked about after the game or on Monday.
All right, he is Justin Hokanson. You can follow him on Twitter @_J Hokanson. Read him at Auburn Live, part of On3 Sports. He'll be covering practice this week leading up to San Jose State. So get all the insight from Hoke. Thank you, Justin. Have a great week.
See you guys. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Take care. Hokanson with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.